Imagine you are applying for a job as an organist. You're given a melody you've never seen before. You're asked to improvise on it, then transpose it. Then you're given a bass line and expected to turn it into music. And finally, you might even be given a subject and asked to improvise a fugue. No preparation. Could you do it? Let's start with something quite simple, a bass line. It doesn't look like much, but for a musician in Bach's time, this could be the starting point for an entire musical texture. It wasn't simply a matter of filling in a few chords. A skilled player could use the bass to create several musical lines at the keyboard in real time. And we have unusually good evidence that Bach thought that was fundamental. In 1727, he wrote a testimonial for one of his pupils, Friedrich Gottlieb Wild. Bach said that he had taught him keyboard and thoroughbass, together with the fundamental principles of composition which came from them. That's quite revealing. For Bach, playing, harmony and composition weren't necessarily separate subjects. You learned how music worked by making it. And then there was the chorale. A melody like this would have been completely familiar to Bach and his pupils. Today, when students study Bach chorales, they often meet them as finished four-part pieces. But Bach's son, Carl Philipp Emanuel, describes something rather different. He tells us that his father's pupils began with four-part thoroughbass. Then Bach gave them a chorale melody and supplied the bass himself. The people had to invent the two parts in between. Later, Bach took away even that support. The pupils had to invent their own basses. So the exercise wasn't necessarily about finding a single correct harmonization. It was about learning how to make convincing musical choices. And there is some fascinating evidence for this. We even have sources connected with Bach's circle where the same chorale melody appears with different bass lines underneath it. Change the bass, and you change the harmony. Change the harmony, and the same melody can go somewhere quite different. Then there's improvisation. Now, this is a finished composition. I'm not suggesting that Bach sat down and improvised the C major prelude exactly as we have it. But listen to how it's made. The pattern remains remarkably consistent. What's changing underneath it is the harmony. You don't necessarily begin with every individual note. You know patterns. You know how one harmony leads to another. You know how to move into one key and how to get back again. Gradually, these things become part of a musical vocabulary. And musicians of Bach's time wrote about how this could be learned. Johann David Heineken, writing in 1728, describes how a player could begin in one key, move through related keys, and use familiar musical patterns to construct a prelude. So improvisation wasn't simply sitting at a keyboard and hoping for inspiration. There was a craft behind it. And then we come to fugue. Listen to that again. Imagine that's all you've been given. Now I make a fugue. That sounds almost impossible. But improvising fugues really was part of the professional organist world. In 1702, the German theorist Andreas Werkmeister described how a good organist should be tested. Give him a fugue subject and ask him to improvise on it in different ways. Then give him a chorale to vary, then transpose it, and then test his ability in thoroughbass. But there's an important qualification. An improvised fugue wasn't necessarily expected to sound like this. A carefully written fugue could be much more elaborate. Research suggests that improvised fugues could have a changing number of voices, more chordal writing, and more frequent cadences. So they were related to written fugues, but they weren't quite the same thing. Even so, I'd still rather not be given that examination. I spent most of my life playing Bach, and I find this extraordinary. But there's another side to it. It's tempting to imagine Bach as some sort of musical Superman. And of course, he was an extraordinary musician. But these skills weren't unique to him. The fact that improvisation, transposition, chorale playing and thorough bass could form part of an organist's examination tells us that accomplished professional organists were expected to possess skills like these too. Bach didn't invent these abilities. He grew up in a musical culture in which they were systematically taught. What seems extraordinary is the level to which he mastered them. Perhaps the real difference is that we've separated things which Bach's world often joined together. Today you can be a brilliant performer without composing. You can be a composer without being a virtuoso performer. You can study harmony on paper without having to improvise it at the keyboard. And many superb classical musicians can go through their entire training without ever being asked to improvise a fugue. That's not because musicians today are less capable. We've simply become more specialized. Listen to something like one of Bach's trio sonatas. One player is controlling 3 independent musical lines. Performance, harmony, counterpoint, coordination, all happening at once. For Bach, those different musical skills seem to be much more closely connected than we often make them today. So could you do what Bach did? Most of us probably couldn't. I certainly couldn't do it all. But perhaps that's not really the most interesting question. Bach didn't simply possess these skills. He belonged to a musical culture in which skills like these were systematically taught. And that leaves us with another question. If we learn music in the way musicians of Bach's time learned it, how much of this could we learn to do again?